living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
A little bit. Try to get into your head. Just a tiny bit. Just enough to know what you might be thinking about, what you might be feeling in terms of what you might want to hear about when I turn on the microphone and I start talking about things, and I just sort of jump right in I don't have any boundaries, any guidelines, any specific point that I'm ever trying to make in just about any of this. I have my little notes and a couple of ideas, and then I just have the guests that I want to talk to, and I just get this sense that I'm just a normal kind of guy, right? I'm just like everybody else out there. I'm just doing my job 9 to 5, whatever, trying to make ends meet, live, love, laugh, do all those little cliche sort of soundbite things that we all imagine that we do, and it's because we do. And so when I hit on something, or I hear something, or I think I find something interesting, and then I decide to include it, I assume it's because I think that most people will find it interesting, and that most people will find that there's some value in it. Otherwise, don't bother. That's a bummer. Yeah, so we got a weird start to the show at the beginning of the show here today, and just tech problems. You know how it goes sometimes. I'm just glad that people do. It surprises me every day, the people that I see who are listening and who are commenting on the show and have things to input and ideas that they want to share, or things that they want to see on the show. And today's a perfect example of that across the board. It just happens all the time. There's just this synergy about reality when you're actually living in, and you're in it for the moment, and you're sharing yourself with your reality. It's this weird thing that I just see. It happens all the time without really trying. You realize that I don't make a lot of effort. My whole goal in life is to get maximum return for minimum investment. It's very capitalist of me, right? But it's true of my entire life, everything about me. A minimal investment for the maximum return. That's not to say that I'm stingy or I'm not a good lover, that I don't share with my partner. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just the things like work or things that take my time away from me doing the things that I would rather do, and that's it's a really thin line, because as much as I love to do this, I would still rather be sort of hanging out with my wife and doing that. You know what I mean? All of us would, but we have to take our time, our minutes, that energy that we have, and find a direction and place for it. And I like this. I like to be able to do this, and I like to see that it's successful. And it's really cool to watch and see the people who are listening and really think that it's worth taking their time, even if it's just for the hour that I'm talking to somebody. But it just keeps happening over and over again in my life, and I think it's just a matter of that directed energy and that feeling, and just being in the moment, that I think helps really bring that to any sense of reality. It gives me a little bit of a grounding in my own reality and understanding what the world is and what I am in it and how I fit in it. Because everybody sort of wants to know the answer to that question, even if they avoid it by trying to fill their time with any number of things. They still want to know, what it's about and if their presence here is worth it. Well, you can gauge that by the smiles of the people around you. The more smiles you get, the more laughter you get, things like that. But it's a little bit harder when it comes to work or when it comes to something like this where you're sharing with the group, with you, with somebody that's not in your immediate circle. And that's what keeps hitting me as I beat around the bush to this point, is just seeing people that I know, seeing people that I respect, seeing people that I like, that I love, that I know in real life, tune into the show and listen, just to hear what I say, which is great, because any other time those people, we'd be doing something other than discussing some of these things and getting to have some of these conversations. So it's a real pleasure to be able to do it, and I'm glad that you come along for the ride, and it's great to watch it grow, and I hope that you'll come along and continue to watch it grow. Just continue to like, share, follow, and subscribe. Those are those core things that we have to do. That's what makes this thing. Every time I see this, it is people I know. It is people that I know are liking and sharing. It is, and it is, when you look at the numbers about where it comes from, it is because of you. It is because of the people actually making sure that it shares across the social media, and that could be a tough thing to do, because we hit on one of those things this week. I mean, it's amazing. We're 4 days into the new administration, right? And the economy's back on track, and COVID-19 is a thing of the past now, and there's no more kids in cages, and everybody's equal. What's it? Oh, they're telling me in my ear that none of that's true, that none of that's happened. But the COVID thing is interesting, because I don't know if you pay attention to it as much as I do, which is to say not very much, because I only pay attention to it just sort of in passing, but enough to know what's going on. That's what's scary, the limited amount of attention that I pay to things and still realize and know what's going on, and then look at other people and realize that they won't even make that minimum effort to understand what's going on, or have their thoughts about it. But with the COVID-19 thing over the last few days, just since the new administration has taken over, all of a sudden, all of these things are being recognized. Things that I've talked about myself, many other people included, of course. But that I've talked about over the year, all the people across Republic Broadcasting Network, we've been talking about for the past year, about faulty testing, the PCR test, the quality of the numbers that are coming in, the disinformation in those numbers, and the comorbidity of COVID-19, and it being just attached to everything, and they're just being that, helping to drive that panic. Well, this week they finally have come out and said all these same things that we're saying, but now it's hitting mainstream. It's like the World Health Organization has come out and said, "Oh, the PCR test is too fast of a cycle. There's not enough information being drawn out. That it could actually." That the test could result in positive result for any number of things, not just COVID-19. So it's interesting to see the quick shift as soon as there was a shift in the regime at the top there, and I don't know how far it'll play out. I don't know how much more we'll get out of it, how much more traction they'll get out. Because we don't know. It's all a game, and it's all and at that level. And in the societal level, it gets turned into a political game. Each of us individually, we may be doing our own thing and may have it all square within our mind, but the system is broken and mixed up with a bunch of people who have all of these weird ideas about how they individually or how they as a collective can change the world and make things better if they just manipulate the right things, if they just pick the right thing at the right time and the right amount of money, or just enough theft from this person to give it to that person. They'll hit on the right magic combination of things that will change things for the better when things aren't that bad, unless you look at it from a control perspective. If you look at this from an if you look at the world from authoritarian perspective, it's horrible. They have no control over anything. They just have they as much control as they exercise over everything. They have no control over anything, and that's that reality. That's toward anarchy. That's that fact of anarchy that we live in every single second of every day. That we manipulate and we change the world and we do the things that we want to do and we interact with the people that we like, that we don't like, that we don't know all the time, and we do so voluntarily and we do so without any consideration or need for the input of authority. It's a really simple concept. You just open your eyes to it and realize that the panic about the things that are wrong with the world is the panic of the authoritarian. It's the panic of the control groups, the meddlers, the people who want to see things done their way instead of just letting you do things your way and suffer the consequences or accept the rewards for it as may be. And that's I think that's a pretty good way for people to begin to look at freeing themselves. Here's another way: like, share, follow, subscribe. TowardAnarchy.com. Check out January 24th if you're not live with us and the information isn't just right there when you go to TowardAnarchy.com. Click the archive, click into January, and you click on the 24th, and you will see Lenore Skenazy. She's a mother and an author and a speaker. She's founder of the Free Range Kids Movement and president of Let Grow. And, of course, she was once dubbed America's worst mom for allowing her 9-year-old son to roam about freely in a big, scary old city. We'll get that story from her, and we'll talk about Let Grow and the Free Range Kids Movement that has come out of that, and her being dubbed America's worst mom. She'll join the conversation in about 20 minutes or so. And as I started to say earlier at the introduction about this idea of people that I'm seeing watching and that I respect, and that they're wanting to provide their input and get into the show and be a part of it, and it's just happening everywhere. This is another great example of it, because along with the links to the Let Grow, to follow the Let Go website or the project on, there's a great video that I shared up there that we'll talk about when Lenore gets here, but I also shared her Twitter and Facebook links as well. But I share a couple of links every week, or try to, generally. And sometimes I'll talk about them, sometimes I won't, but I have to make it a point to definitely talk about these, because these people, the writers of both of these articles, independently of each other and nothing to do with each other, just all of a sudden happen to contact me and say, hey, would you please post this article, this story, this information on your website? Will you share it with your audience? And it's good information. I liked it, so I'm happy to share it. And it was just a surprise out of all of a sudden, out of the blue, just to get a couple of emails separately, completely independent of each other. That was what was neat about it. And both just saying, we were listening to an episode, you were talking about this, we thought this might be pretty cool to share with your listeners, and here's the link. Check it out. If you do, if you don't. And so I checked out the links, and so I have these two links there. There's one from ammo.com, and it's like ammo.com needs to reach out to me to share their content, but they did. That's amazing. That's awesome, and that's because of you. The like, the share, the follow, the subscribe, whatever platform you're on. But Sam Jacobs has this history about Lysander Spooner, and I guess it's his birthday this past week or something, and his contributions, of course, the writings, the Constitution of No Authority, all the various things that he talked about with the authoritarians and anarchy, and his response to it. But then also this goes into his battle with the United States Postal Service, and how it's kind of a little bit of how he became who he was because of the fact that he was in this battle with the United States Post Office, because of his own natural law beliefs, that they couldn't act, aggressively or coercively to force him to go out of business and not be competition for the U.S. Postal Service. So it's a great article, and it's right there, towardanarchy.com, on January 24th, of course. And then right underneath that is another wonderful article. Same thing. People that don't need me and my voice reaching out to have me share their work, and it's really, really cool. Alex Horseman has this thing from the Libertas Bella website. It's libertasbella.com. And some Murray Rothbard quotes on libertarianism, economics, and freedom. Just the great Murray Rothbard. I haven't read a lot of his stuff myself. Just a paper here, this, that. That's the way I am with all of these guys. But I'm a believer in individuals and their body of work, and this idea that we've floated the last few weeks here after I saw the quote somewhere from Dr. Paul about the imperfect deliverance of a perfect message. And all of these people, Mises and Rothbard and Spooner and anyone, all of them, the voices today, Larkin Rose, any of these individuals out there, David Icke and Alex Jones, anybody who's talking about these things, there's value within the truth that they offer, and less value in spending a lot of time analyzing who they are as individuals, and the mistakes that they made. You understand what I'm saying? This idea of separating quality information and art and works in the world from the individuals and the people, the flawed people who make them. I think it's very important, or you can go through life dismissing a whole bunch of ideas and a whole bunch of things that can be presented to you that can offer you a different view, a different understanding of the world, somebody else's grasp of things, and realize at the same time that individual can be just as flawed as you are if you admit that you are. But then again, there's some of us who are just perfect. No, not even close. A wonderful little quote from Rothbard that was on that page, because there's a bunch of quotes in that collection. It is no crime to be ignorant of economics, which is, after all, a specialized discipline and one that most people consider to be a dismal science. But it is totally irresponsible to have a loud and vociferous opinion on economic subjects while remaining in this state of ignorance. Murray Rothbard said that. And I agree. I would only add that I would only change that I don't think, and he would probably agree with me, that economics is actually that hard when you look at the basic, not the numbers, not the manipulation game, the playing with things to try to guess at what the economy will do if you tweak this number or tweak that number. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about economics, the expenditure of energy for a return is what I was talking about earlier on the show. I want to invest as little energy to get as much possible return. That's winning, if you will. And there's this fantastic meme that I shared. I knew that some of you guys would love this. And because it has a double entendre, that's always fun. But it just the concept of it, the idea, the message behind it itself. It's a picture of somebody's shirt. It says "Say no to the prick," and there is, of course, a needle there, a getting ready to inject somebody. But the double entendre is there's also a picture of Bill Gates there. So, say no to the prick. We'll be right back. I don't know if I was clear enough when I was talking about it. I try not to spit all over the place. Good thing I have this nice little pop filter that would have just jumped into the microphone and shorted everything out. That was a biggin. I don't know if I was clear enough before when I was talking about that, but they're changing all of these numbers going into this new presidency, and they're changing the collection data and the test numbers and everything about COVID-19, and it's just it hit me this week thinking about it, and everybody else around me as well. That's something that it's a little bit easier for me to gauge, as most people have sort of retreated over the last year. I've actually found myself back out into public more than I had been in the previous couple of years, for sure. And so it's an easy way for me to gauge when other people bring an idea to me, when they come to me, and normal people. I'm not talking about the circles that I'm running where I expect them to come up with these things like this. I'll have to tell you about this thing. Ken will love this. But it's such a great gauge when other people will come to me and point this out, and a couple of people came to me and pointed out about them changing Fossey in particular, talking about the count, the totals, the deaths, and some misinformation and mishandling of numbers and things that have gone on there, and then of course with them changing their position on the PCR tests and talking about them needing to alter what they're doing in that to get the right information. But you can just put out good information. You can continue to put out good information and expect people will not know or get it or understand. There will always be some subset of people who are always going to believe things. And while I don't have any particular problem with the Q people, they oftentimes to me seem to be kind of childish and sort of wishful and wistful in this. It's almost hippie-ish in this notion that, oh, things are going to be okay. There's a big savior. He's going to fix everything. That, the big scam's not going to continue. And it seems a little naive to me, given how well the scam goes and how well it does for itself, and how important to know that it is the system everybody concentrates on, but it's the people within the system that are the problem, that can continue to perpetuate the problems with the system. That's too many P's in one sentence. There's this thing called Poe's Law. If you're an internet geek, you might understand, you might know what Poe's Law is, but Poe's Law is just this notion that without context, you can't tell if something is a parody or not, particularly in relation to the internet. You can't tell. That's what happens with Q. That's what happens with some of the 4chan stuff. And I'll give you an example of this because there was a thing that came out, I believe it was this week, in relation to a Q and the presidency and Biden and Trump and sticking with the plan. So this is the quote, and again, without context, you can't tell, and so there are always going to be some people who believe this. That's the heart of Poe's Law. Joe Biden has been arrested. The deep state is in disarray and has struck a deal with the Trump administration. There will be an experimental surgery that will exchange the faces of Biden and Trump. So when you watch Biden's inauguration, you will really be watching Trump being sworn in for a second term. And when you're watching the Trump trials, that is really Biden paying for his crimes. Also, when Trump as Biden stammers or slurs his words, that's because Trump is still learning to duplicate his speech patterns. And it's interesting. You go ahead and laugh. I'll give you time to laugh if you feel the need to laugh about it. It's outlandish. It's an interesting thing. One, you don't need to do the face-off thing anymore. The John Travolta, Nick Cage thing where they actually switch faces in that horrible, horrible movie. Okay, it wasn't that bad. Just one horrible. You don't need to do that anymore. The technology is so good, and we have a thing, and this has been rolling around in the back of my mind for a while now, that the presidency is fake, that it's really just a show. We all kind of get this in a sense, but I'm talking about in it becoming a more of a reality, not just a sense of all these people are fake and all it's all just a show. I mean, in a reality. And now we're in the COVID era, and there's a distance. You know, limited number of people allowed at the inauguration. People kept at a distance. All you have to do is use computer technology and show faces on screens anymore. You don't have to go through all that facial recognition. You know, change the entire face and learn to change the voice and everything. Lenore Skenazy joins me next on Toward Anarchy. Okay, punch your browser to towardanarchy.com and look for January 24th. If you have to click on the archive button, it's easy enough to do. And you will see that my guest for the conversation today, Lenore Skenazy, she's a mother, author, speaker, founder of the Free Range Kids Movement, and president of Let Grow. She's been dubbed America's worst mom for allowing her 9-year-old son to roam about freely in a big old scary city. And I'm a city boy myself, and I'm a free range parent myself, and so it was amazing when I found the information to contact her and said, hey, you know what, we're going to get her on the show and talk to her about the things that she does and the message that she has for people. So it's a real pleasure to get a chance to talk to you, Lenore. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you. You know, now I'm on your site too, and I'm looking, are you on a, when it says the About tab, are you on a seesaw in that picture?
I am actually. That's.
Oh my God!
I'm glad you noticed that. Yes.
Yeah. I'd say grown men are usually afraid of seesaws, but good for you. What's interesting?
I was playing with my kids at the park.
Okay, so your park has an old-fashioned seesaw that doesn't have like bumpers underneath it or a spring in the middle, so nobody goes too high or too low.
There's a tire underneath. It's old.
There is a tire.
Yeah.
That's not old school. Old school, and I'm not saying old school was better in this case because it wasn't, and I hated
Fair
it.
enough.
But old school, there was no tire underneath, and you were constantly in terror, basically. And if you weighed nothing, like me back then, you were always in the air being threatened with, about to be plummeting onto basically the ground. So, whatever it taught us, there was a certain resilience that we had to have in ourselves because there was no tire there to bounce back for us.
That's a great analogy for the whole thing, isn't it?
Well, it is, although, I'm not a hard ass, and literally from all those years. And so I'm not trying to say that, we ate nails and that was so good. And if kids don't eat nails today, they'll never develop sharp teeth or whatever, gastrointestinal fortitude. So it's a good analogy, but a better analogy is just sort of the normal fun, the normal freedom that we were afforded because our parents, my parents, way back in the old days, weren't considered terrible for not distressing, just going into, paroxysms of fear every time they sent us outside thinking something awful could happen. That hadn't become sort of the knee-jerk response to the idea like that you could take your eyes off your kids, but if you do, you'll live to regret it. That had not become a sort of an American thing yet. And I'm sorry that it now is because it's not based on reality, but fear is very, very powerful.
Well, fear drives a lot of what we see in pop culture a lot of times, and the need to micromanage children. It's one of these things that it's evident that it is something that some people feel we need to do. There's a certain group of people that feel we need to do. And then I think that most of us get that children are okay for the most part, that they're okay to learn on their own, and that we should be there more as custodians and guides to help them figure things out when they don't understand.
Yeah, and sometimes we shouldn't be there, so that when they can't figure something out, finally they do. But, in a society that really has come up with very clever ways of keeping kids constantly, under adult supervision, whether that's electronically because we know where they are, using, Find My Kid, or if it's under another adult, aegis because they're in a class or a sports league or something after school or any kind of program. Basically, kids have very little time when there isn't somebody who knows what they're doing and often is showing them how to do it, often grading them on how they're doing, and, encouraging, but always sort of assuming that they couldn't do it by themselves, and so there must be an adult there to make sure they do it well and to make sure they're not hurt.
Well, you must have heard about the big to-do here a couple of weeks ago then at the
Where?
yeah, right. Which one? In particular, this was I can't remember what the guy's name is right off the top of my head, but he did a series of tweets, and it was about his young daughter.
Dean Dad. We're talking
Yes.
Dean Dad. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You heard about that too.
Dean Dad was yeah, and I opined about it. And if you go to letgrow.org, you can find my thoughts on Dean Dad. Dean Dad was so interesting because, so what the deal was is that the dad, the daughter, who I think was about 9 years old, came in and said, "Dad, can I have some beans?" And he said, "Sure." And she said, "But I don't know how to open it." And he said, "Well, here's a can opener." And she said, "How do I use it?" And he said, "You got to figure it out." And then the series of tweets detailed in sort of strange fashion, somewhere between, I guess, drill sergeant and, proud daddy, how hard it was for his kid to learn and how much he kept saying, like, "I'm sure you'll figure it out eventually." And then she did, but it took 6 hours. And then the internet just jumped on him and the whole Twitter thread. Was he starving his child? Was he abusing her? Isn't a dad's job to teach, not to just wait for people to figure things out on their own without any help whatsoever? And was he tormenting her, or was he trusting her? And for me, the things that were interesting are probably not what everybody else is thinking about. One is that we do post about parenting as if it is a spectator sport. Two, that we respond to it, from the outside with incredible fierce feelings about things without really knowing what it was like in their house. Was he joking with her? Were they eating snacks at the time? As it turns out that they were. People thought that she was starving. Is he sort of pretending that it was a bigger deal just for, comic effect or to congratulate himself or his daughter? All this stuff. It's like, it used to be that what happened, you raised your kids. Nobody really cared that much how you were doing it, so long as you were not literally abusing them, or neglecting them. So the idea that this is our national pastime, second maybe only to football, is kind of strange to me, that parenting is just such a public spectacle at this point, and we all have our opinions, and we're chewing about it right now. But the thing that interested me about, right. And so what happened in that story afterwards, or after it sort of started blowing up on Twitter, is that people found old tweets of his, and if you look at them on face value, they're horrible. Some of them are totally anti-Semitic. It's like, I have a Jew lawyer who's going to tell the Jews, blah, blah, blah. It was bad. Yeah. But he said later that, oh my God, these were, sort of making fun of the way somebody completely prejudiced would speak. It is so hard to be funny these days because people are so eager to take offense. So I just want to say one thing about it, which was that when those old tweets, which, I sort of wish everything disappeared, when those old tweets surfaced and I read them, that sort of cemented for me how I felt about the dad. I thought, okay, was he trusting his kid and kind of funny and, come on, kid, you can do it, like a Boy Scout troop leader? Or was he mean and, disparaging like a jerk? And then when I saw these old tweets that looked like he was, racist, anti-Semitic, whatever, that allowed me to dismiss anything that I thought might have been good about his parenting. And I realized that that's what we're all doing. We're all trying to figure out where the moral winds are which way they're blowing, and get on the right side of that so nobody hates us, and so that we're making the right virtuous decision to, either condemn him or praise him. And I didn't like that about me. I mean, it showed that I really had no moral compass. I was waiting to see what other people said about him, and if they all hated him, and there was proof that he was hateable from 2000 and whatever, then I could say, I guess that was bad parenting. But really, the tweets had nothing to do with his parenting, and in the end, I'm sort of sorry that we are so worried about how we appear to the world that we are constantly blaming parents and ragging on parents, because that's an easy way to, find a team and stay there safely while the cloud passes by.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it with everything, but the kids, things like rearing children definitely tend to be polarizing, definitely a very polarizing issue. And I'm glad that you considered yourself in it, because that's the way I felt about it too. I exactly the same way about it, because I'm thinking, all right, the guy's probably just doing what I would do. I'm not torturing my child or punishing them. I'm just saying here's a learning opportunity, and here's an opportunity to talk to some people and raise some knowledge and have a little bit of fun and do this whole thing. And it's well, I mentioned it earlier in the show before you joined the conversation. I was talking about Poe's law, and if you know what Poe's law is, it's this.
No, I don't.
It's an internet nerd thing. It's this idea that without context, you can't tell the absurdity of something. You can't tell if it's a joke or if it's real, and people aren't able to discern. Good. Yeah. It's the same thing, I think.
Is it Poe, P-O-E, or P-O? I mean, is it Edgar Allan Poe? I mean, who's...
It's P-O-E. Yeah, Poe. It's not Edgar Allan Poe. It's going to be a more modern nerd internet guy. Somebody I don't know who he is. I just happen to know the term and what it's in reference to.
I'm gonna look it up. I like that. Yeah, everything is so floating out there, and I always think of it as chum. It's like stuff thrown into the Twitter world. Where I like to hang out. I mean, there's so much that I do enjoy on Twitter, but the idea of condemnation, actually, I wrote about that and then I got condemned, and I felt like people didn't read my article, because my article was really parsing about, like, how did I determine how I felt about this guy? I had no way of figuring him out until I looked at some old tweets, and why is that how I should be determining what I feel about him teaching his kid how to use a can opener or not. So people just started saying, like, Lenore likes people who starve their children. Oh, not true. I don't. So it is a very judgmental world out there. And I think that's back to fear too. It's like you don't want people to judge you, so you start saying, like, oh, I always hated that, or oh, that's bad. I agree.
I had this run in on Twitter. I don't get into it. I avoid these things. But somebody had just posted a thing about how she was going to call the cops on the UPS guy because he would drive down the street and the kids were playing in the street. And I thought, well, wait a minute. He's a vehicle. He's a delivery guy. He's supposed to drive down the street delivering stuff. The kids aren't supposed to be playing in the yard. And I found myself doing that same thing, or be playing in the street. They're supposed to be playing in the yard, not playing in the street. And I found
you get out of the street, car, and you run off the street, right?
Yeah, but that's what we used to do.
Depending on how quiet the street is, yeah.
Well, obviously, things have changed so much since then. There's no responsibility for the child. The child isn't told, all right, go down the street and play with your friend and be back when the lights come on, when the street lights come on. That was our thing. You had to be home when the street lights came on, and that was it. Otherwise, I don't think my parents really knew where I was or what I was doing for most of my life.
Right. Perhaps not even today. Yeah. That's true. So you like complained about the complainer, or what happened?
That was just it. I said, well, what do you, because, well, I'm an anarchist and I don't think that you should go around throwing authority upon people if they haven't actually hurt someone or damaged someone. So, okay, I'm not trying to say to take it to the extreme and that you don't have to do something about it and the kid gets run over. But what I'm saying is that this individual has control over the situation. There's no crime here. There's just children playing in the street and a guy trying to do his job. How about you do your part to keep the children out of the street when he's coming, and then there's no problem. We don't have to worry about it. Why do we have to involve authority? And so that was the gist of the conversation, instead of me trying to tell her how to raise her kids.
Yeah, it's all confusing. The outsourcing of conflict to the authorities is something, not just conflict, almost the outsourcing of everyday life to the authorities is very disturbing to me. And I'll give you my favorite example, and it's not just if you see something, say something, which I live in New York City. I mean, if I thought that every lunch bag left on the subway was a bomb, I would just have 911 on speed dial. But in the subways, my very self-same subways, there are signs around that say, attention, if you see a sick passenger, do not attempt to help them. Alert the police or an MTA authority. Of course, there's nobody from the MTA, Metropolitan Transit Authority, who's ever around, so that's just a funny idea. Go find somebody who works for the MTA. Good luck. But I'm so disturbed by that just as a human, because if I see a fellow human who does look sick and I think I can help them, help them get off the train or, sit with them or, give them a cough drop, and all of this is before COVID, of course. I don't think I have to wait for somebody in authority who can deal with a fellow human better than me. And I felt like it sort of is taking away my humanity and saying, little lady, that's not for you. Only the experts who are, with the authority of the state can help a fellow human being. And I don't know what you think about that, but you were talking about how you don't want to call the authorities when they're not needed. And I feel like we're being trained to do exactly that.
Well, it's the same conversation with the kids, right? If the parent's not needed, the child, just let the child be, let the people be. When there's an actual conflict or something happens, then call in somebody for help. Otherwise, we're really good at managing ourselves from day to day, from minute to minute, across and around the world. I mean, we seem to do so pretty functionally. We got to go into a break. We're talking to Lenore Skenazy, and we will be right back on Toward Anarchy. It's funny when I do this to myself. Go to towardanarchy.com. If you're live with me, if you're alive with me in real time, and you're actually listening to the live version of the show and not some later recording of it, you can catch where I did this to myself. Go to towardanarchy.com, and right on the front page, you'll see January 24th. There's a link to the page for the show today and the conversation that I'll be having. And I'll say, yeah, go to towardanarchy.com. Look for January 24th if you have to dig in the archive. But if you go to the archive right now, it's not actually there. Every once in a while, I do this to myself because I'm still live. I'm still in real time as I'm doing this. I don't need, it's right there on the front page. And so I catch myself doing little things like that every once in a while. So on the front page at towardanarchy.com, until such time as it's not needed, it'll be in the archive later. You can get to the link. You can listen to the show. You can share it. You can follow Lenore on Twitter at Free Range Kids. I also shared a link there for the Let Grow page on Facebook. And then also there's this the video. We shared the link of the video. Learn how the Let Grow project can help kids with anxiety. And I know you wanted to talk about that. This is a really short segment right here, so I don't know if the time will fit in. If you want to wait until after the break and take a chance and tell people about this story that they heard years ago about a 9-year-old kid wandering the streets of New York all by himself.
Wasn't the streets, Michael?
Right.
Nobody cares about the streets. It was that he was on the subway.
Oh,
I
yes.
let my 9-year-old ride the subway.
Yeah.
Yes. So how short are we talking about? Like, do I have 30 seconds? What do I have?
I got a couple minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the inciting incident, as they say in Hollywood, is that when our son was 9 years old, happens to be 22 now, so it's been a while, he started asking my husband and me if we would take him someplace he'd never been before here in New York City, where we live, and let him find his own way home by subway. That was his dearest desire. He's one of those kids who likes, public transportation, although now he's more obsessed with cars. But back then, I guess, because he was 9, it was the subway. And so we decided that we thought he was ready. We were ready to let him. So one sunny Sunday, I took him to Bloomingdale's, fancy schmancy department store in a fancy schmancy zip code. And I left him there. And with the what they call a Metro card, which is the card that you use to get onto the subway, and $20 in case he couldn't deal with that and had to take a cab, and quarters, because back then there were actually still some public phones around, and a map because they're free. And so he took all of those in hand, and he hopped onto the subway, and he went down to 34th Street, which is the same street that the Miracle was on, and popped out of the subway and took a bus across town to where we lived at the time. And came through the door of the apartment, levitating, I would say, because he was so proud that he had done something on his own, that we had trusted him to do it, that he had entered this new phase of life, which was, greater independence. The world is his oyster. And I'm a newspaper columnist, so I wrote about it. And 2 days after the Why I Let My 9-Year-Old Ride the Subway Alone column appeared in the New York Sun, I was on the Today Show, MSNBC, Fox News, and NPR. Finally culminating 13 years later on Toward Anarchy, discussing why I trusted my kid.
America's Worst Mom, that's who we're talking to, Lenore Skenazy. We will come back right after the top of the hour and continue the conversation right here on Toward Anarchy. Okay, we are off into hour number 2. My guest is Lenore Skenazy. Aside from having just a classic East Coast name, she's a mother and an author and a speaker, and she's the founder of the Free Range Kids movement, and she's also president of Let Grow. And I shared a couple of links, as always. If you go to towardanarchy.com, look for January 24th, Let Grow. There's a website. There's tools and resources for parents and educators to help facilitate the child independence that we've been talking about and their development. And then there's a video there that you can watch as well. Lenore, tell us about the video, because you stressed specifically that you wanted to share this video.
Yeah, because I love it. The simple thing is that over the years, I've realized that it is very hard, even if you want to give your kids some independence, to be the only person doing it, right? I mean, I don't mind being America's Worst Mom, but I don't think most parents want to be, yelled at for letting their kids, for instance, play outside or walk to school or climb a tree or even separate from them at the playground for a few minutes. And so what Let Grow has been doing is created a program for schools called the Let Grow Project. And frankly, all the materials are free, so I can sound like I'm a shill because there's nothing that I'm getting from it other than the satisfaction of when schools do this. They send kids home with a homework assignment that is basically, it says your kid has to go home and do something by themselves that's new, without their parents. And this is what it takes to get parents to separate from their kids and let them do something, because we're so used to, I'll take you there, honey. I'll drive you to the bus stop. I'll wait till you're on the bus. So this is a change. And when the kids do start doing some things on their own, first of all, it changes the parents, because the parents are so excited when they see the kid come home and they went and got the milk from the store, or they went and got themselves home from soccer. The parent is just extremely proud, right? And they see their kid as blossoming. So that sort of changes the whole equation already. And then they're not the only parent doing it, because all the other parents at school are letting their kids do something like this. So they don't feel like they're crazy. All the parents start talking to each other. What did you let your kid do? All the kids start talking to each other. What did you get to do? Oh, I want to do that next week. Let's do that together. So that's great. But the amazing effect this has had is that even in schools where kids were very, very anxious, one teacher, a 7th grade teacher with kids that she'd never seen as anxious before, as she'd been teaching 20 years, decided to try the Let Grow Project because she just didn't see them doing anything on their own. And in fact, when she had them fill out little Xeroxes of like, is there something that you'd like to do on your own that you haven't done yet? The kids who are 12 and 13 years old were writing things like, I'm hesitant to try walking the dog because I'm afraid it might get off the leash. Or I'd like to climb a tree, but I don't want to break my bones. I want to go in a store, but I've never been in a place with so many strangers without my mom. I want to cut meat, but my parents said it's dangerous and I don't want to cut off my finger. I mean, these are real answers by real 12 and 13-year-olds. So when they started doing the Let Grow project and they had to do things on their own, sometimes they do things that I thought were very minor, like the cutting of the meat or making scrambled eggs or baking a muffin or going to the neighbor's house. But over the year, as they did 20 of these, she assigned the project 20 times, they went from like minor things to bigger things. I walked to church by myself. I got my ears pierced. I joined the swim team. I tried out for, something else. It was like all the stuff that kids had been very, very scared to do started becoming doable. And once they did these things, they became so much less anxious and so much more, like I'd say, fully human, like not embryonic, inside, scared of the whole world because they'd been told they couldn't handle it. It was almost I want somebody to study this because I think it's therapy. I think it's free therapy that is really great for a generation that is growing up extraordinarily anxious and depressed. I mean, the charts are very depressing to look at, how kids are getting so unsure of themselves and afraid of things and almost less curious because there's nothing out there that is for them. And so the video was me interviewing several of the kids, just asking them, like, how did you feel before the project and how did you feel after? And it's pretty astounding. And what I didn't include in the video is that after, the year after this project had been done, the teacher wrote to me and she said that she was crying because one of her students had just written to her that said, thanks to her, because she was such an encouraging, amazing teacher, and doing the Let Grow project, he was no longer on his anxiety medication. So I think if you have something that's free, that works, that there's no downside to, that renormalizes childhood independence and gives confidence back to the parents and the kids and brings them back into the community and makes the community more vibrant because now there are kids around and not just adults and kids in cars, why wouldn't anybody do this? That's my mission on earth, is to suggest that people do the Let Grow project, which you find at letgrow.org, which is free.
It's amazing. That's an amazing story. I love the way that you put it and the way that it worked out like that, because I think you're probably right. I think that there is a therapy to this. There certainly is. People, whether they want to believe it or not, or whether they understand it in and of themselves, there's a real physiological and mental reward to accomplishment, especially accomplishment that you've chosen to try to achieve on your own. And producer Ken makes a good point, and I'm sure you can speak to this, that there are so many other cultures, and we're one that just doesn't have these real coming of age of rites and rituals.
What is the question? Most cultures do have coming of age rituals.
Most cultures do.
And,
the American culture doesn't. You're right.
Right. Or if it does, maybe it's getting your license or something like that, which is a little older. I mean, besides the ritual of like stepping over the line from childhood to adulthood, most cultures let kids do some things on their own. They don't, write in their brains, anytime you let a kid outside, you're a bad parent and your child is going to die. And so in most cultures, kids are walking to school at 5, 6, 7, 8. Here, gosh, I was just dealing with a mom who was trying to get her school to allow her children who were 9, 10, and 11 to please let them walk home without her. And they wouldn't. So part of the problem is not just, that parents are worried or skittish. We have a culture that is growing so risk averse and so I'm risk averse, right? So I think it is good to be averse to real threats and real dangers. And yet, to write everything as a danger is to say that you have to be constantly under surveillance. And so this mom, her kids walk the same mile to and from basically where the school is on other days when they're going to their piano lessons or their soccer team. But the school doesn't want to have to worry about liability, and so they won't recognize the competence of the children or the confidence of the mom. That's it. So you are undermined by a culture in this case that absolutely thinks that there's no trade-off between utter lockdown of kids and otherwise disaster. And I see that there is a trade-off because we were just talking about these kids. Kids are anxious today and depressed, and I don't think it's bad to be online, but you're going to be online a lot more if you can't stay out after school and kick a ball around. So the idea that there's no downside to delivering the child from the SUV to the door of the school and then back again to the womb that is the house is a lie, because there's always a give and take. If you're at home all the time after school or in a supervised activity, you're not learning what you can do, how competent you can be, how you can deal with, a strain like a dog, a scary dog that you pass by, or or temptation. Should I go and go get a donut? I mean, you just have to have a little bit of independence to figure out how you can deal with the world, as opposed to how somebody else can help you all the time.
Well, we've been convinced over the last couple of decades or so that we have to use the village, that everybody has to have their input into the child and its rearing and its development. And so I guess it's developed into this. It's an interesting thing, because some of the things you're talking about I understand from my own reality and having been through it in a bigger city, but I live in a smaller city now where things like that aren't a consideration. You're talking about letting 9-year-old children walk home. They do it all the time here in Topeka, Kansas. It's not a thing to
you're in Kansas? Uh-huh.
Yeah. And
so how far are you from I don't know if it's pronounced Moscow or Moscow in Kansas. Do you know where that is?
It's just like Russia. Yeah, Moscow. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know how far it is from you? Because
I'm not sure.
Okay, I just have to say, because I got an interesting call, actually, from the superintendent of the schools there, and the population is 299, that he was doing the Let Grow project because he'd been there forever, and he was starting to see kids being driven to school, this is before COVID, from houses that he could see from the school. And so I'm sure there are kids still walking in Kansas. I certainly hope so, but it was... The strange thing to me is that even in a town of 299 people, parents were starting to drive their kids from close enough to the school that he could see their homes.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because I grew up in Denver, and I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and I just ran the streets. I did whatever I want. I went wherever I wanted, and I really didn't. When I had to be home, it was when the street lights came on, and I was riding the bus. We didn't have a subway, we didn't have underground, but I was riding the bus all over the city, riding my bike all over the city at a very young age, and so, having gone through that transition from growing up that way to where we are now, and having watched that and felt that change, I actually will note driving around town and be like, that looks like a 9-year-old child that probably shouldn't be on the street walking by themselves. That nagging at the back of the brain.
Isn't that interesting? How the cultural norm shifts even in us, even when we're aware of it, even when we don't want it to be shifting. So when you see a 9-year-old, you don't call 911 and report them, right?
No, not at all. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Right. Good. Right. I'm calling 911 right now. Okay. Michael is missing.
He's gone. No, of course not. My first thought is, are they okay? It looks like they're fine. I'm going on about my business.
Right. So when you talk about it takes a village, you know, I think of that as in a positive way. Not that it takes a village to rat on, you know, kids who are outside and where is their mother. Um, you know, I think you looking and making sure that the kid seems okay, you know, without necessarily even talking to them or bothering them, that is the village, right? I mean, if you
Right.
see a kid who's wailing at the side of the street and he's mangled in a bike, you would stop and you would help him or her. So the idea that a village is, you know, I don't know, interfering and meddling is not how I think of it takes a village. I think it takes a village to say, like, look, you know, all eyes are on these kids. I mean, that's in Japan, you know, kids start walking to school at age 5, and they wear these special little yellow hats, which in America we'd think, oh my God, that makes them so easy to see by the predators.
All right.
And in Japan, they think it makes them easy to see by the village, who knows that, okay, there's a little kid, so when they see them at the corner and maybe the kid is like looking a little tense about crossing, or, you know, they look after the child. And I think that that's a great thing. And I think we'd all like it more if that's what society was, sort of assuming, giving everybody the benefit of the doubt, not saying what a terrible mom to let this kid outside, or what crazy, you know, what horrible thing is going to happen to this kid. But in fact, look, here we are. We care about children. We're all going to look after them. We're not turning them into the police. We're just, you know, we're normal human beings. We care and we watch, and we wish them the best. So to me, the idea of, you know, it's sort of like I was complaining earlier in this interview about the signs in our subway that say, if you see a sick passenger, do not attempt to help them. I think if you see a kid in distress, you do attempt to help them. And if you see a kid who looks fine, you sort of mentally high-five them and go on your way. So I like the idea of caring, and I like the idea of us doing it ourselves without calling the authorities.
I'm glad that you made the distinction, because I think that that's important, because I'm one to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I like the idea of,
if you do, I will call the authorities. Do not throw a baby out with the bathwater. It's a terrible idea, and even I am against it.
Yes. It's just this idea that just because we have a phrase, or we use an idea, or then an idea is expressed and it's absorbed or taken over by sort of one side of the false paradigm of left-right political parties, that we have to sacrifice it to them. But I love that you make the distinction. I love the description of the Japanese people and their understanding. When I was probably 14, 15 years old, my stepfather and I were driving down the street probably 9 o'clock at night, and there was a little 3-year-old girl wandering the street.
Wow.
This is paying attention. This is the village. This, we picked up the little girl and we took her to the nearest public place and called the police and found this girl her home. She just slipped out the door, and just one of these things. But that's the village paying attention. I love that you made that distinction.
Right, and let me make a distinction too. So there's a kid who got out. Obviously, that's dangerous, and we don't want 3-year-olds wandering around, especially at night when their parents don't know where they are. So sometimes I'd say something great happens, which is that you see the kid, you call the police. The police, have been getting frantic calls from the parent, or maybe the parent was asleep and didn't know what had happened, but they reunite the child and the parent, and maybe they say, you need a lock on your door now, or something like that. And I love that. That's all great. What I hate is that sometimes the parent gets arrested for being neglectful, even though, it was something that they couldn't have predicted until that day. The kid had never opened the door. They didn't even think the kid could open the door. I mean, what I really want is for all those cases to be, give the parent the benefit of the doubt. If they're not literally neglecting their kid or abusing their kid, let's chalk it up to weird things happen sometimes, and now so you've been forewarned. But the idea that life has to be perfect and that your kid can never wander off at the fair, or that something doesn't go wrong every once in a while, you have to leave your kid home alone even though they're 6 because you have to run because your husband's car broke down. I mean, let's not try to turn people into criminals just because life is not perfect and predictable.
Well, that's it. There's no crime here. Children wander
Mhm.
off. Children get lost. Doors get opened when you
Mhm.
didn't know they could be opened. These are real things that happen all the time. It wasn't.
Mhm.
It must have just been last school year. It just happened. One of these things where something you're describing, where somebody had to run to take the kid to the school here for 10 seconds, and they have video
Mhm.
cameras and everything around their house, and they're sort of at the school, is stuck in the line watching their kid run out of the
Mhm.
house.
Oh my God! Then what
Yeah.
happened?
I actually happened to be coming around the corner at the same time and saw the little girl come come running out into the middle of the street, and the
Wow.
older kids noticed, or the mother was able to alert them through whatever camera system or whatever they have, but ultimately they came out and grabbed her.
Wow.
Yeah, just one of those
Wow.
things.
Yeah.
And we got to go into another break. We'll come back here and we'll wrap it up with Lenore Skenazy right here on Toward Anarchy. Well, unfortunately, as things always do, they must come to some sort of end. And that will be the case with my conversation with Lenore Skenazy. It's been fantastic talking with you. I just knocked over my camera. That's kind of funny.
That's
It's
how fantastic.
what's that?
That's how fantastic. You're just knocking things over. It's been
Yes,
so great.
it is. No,
Yes.
it's just been a great conversation. It's always nice to hear from people who are just getting along in the world and it seem to have sort of common sense about things and let people do what they want to do, and it starts with the children, and it starts at that young age, and allowing people to be who they are, and I think it's obvious that it carries over, and that I think that into adulthood, and I think that we need to get back to that in a lot of ways when it comes to raising our children, and this idea of individualism, instead of trying to raise them to be molded in our own view or in society's view or whatever it is, just letting them
Mhm.
explore the world and find it like everybody used to have to do before the world could be brought to their door.
Yeah, it's true. Well, in one, I sort of think it's also chicken egg, because one reason that kids are online so much is if you're not allowed to leave the front door and go and, explore the woods or go get a candy bar or anything, well, then at least there's the world where you can explore online and you can meet your friends online, because you're not allowed to go and meet them at the park. So it's not totally technology's fault. In a way, it's provided an escape hatch for the kids that we're so, clamping down on.
Well, I mean, I'm lucky because I got to be one of those kids that grew up with the technology, and so I've known it all of my life, and we're at a point
Oh.
right now where
Mhm.
we're having to develop a new understanding of how people will interact with other people and other things through technology.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's all pretty confusing and interesting. And gosh, I'm sure you spend a lot of your time on, Zoom and Skype and everything these days.
Yeah, and my children do. I have three children of my own, and we're going through
Mhm.
this. We've always raised them to be free range as far as that goes. We let them make their own decisions about what they wanted to do, even with their education. Whether they want to attend
Mhm.
school or whether they want to do it from home, things like that.
Oh
A
wow.
perfect
Mhm.
example. Our oldest is 20, and she's just
Mhm.
getting her license. But and that may sound like a horrible thing to some people, but
Doesn't sound horrible to me.
oh, well, I hear these horror stories. It's sort of a cliche about teaching your 16-year-old child how to drive, let alone your 16-year-old daughter, and fathers in the side of the car just gripping onto the oh
Yeah,
what
right, right,
bar,
right.
and just oh God, but I didn't have to go through any of that. I let the child decide when she wanted to get her license and finally get out there into the world. And you know what she did? She paid for her own education to learn how to drive, and she bought her own car, and she paid for her own insurance. I didn't
Wow.
have to come up with any of that.
Wow, I'm very impressed. That's cool.
Isn't
Good
it
for
great?
you. Right.
Good for
And
her.
me, I have to say, that's really good. Yes, yes, yes. Wow. Well, that's neat. We
Yeah.
had our kids learn from, we live in Jackson Heights, Queens, which has 167 languages, and our kids' teacher was Abdul, and it just was great because basically he just had whoever he was teaching at the time, he would just put them in the driver's seat and then have them drive. His kids were in the back seat, like, dropped them off at their piano lessons, dropped the wife off at the mall, and you're learning, real life driving in Queens. It's pretty great.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. Apparently she picked the driving school around here with all of the best marks, and everybody's every time we've talked about it to somebody when we went to buy the car and all these things, everybody every time she mentioned the name, oh yeah, oh they're fantastic. They're the best. And she said instant. It was quick. It was so quick. I could just imagine the other road of trying to go through all of that cliche teaching the kid to drive, and as opposed to her in about 2 weeks magically understanding and having this confidence to drive.
Wait, so let's talk about a couple words there, because the magic is the confidence, and confidence is magic, and the magic came from, at 20, she wanted to learn. There was something in her that said, now's the time, I'm ready, I can handle it, and there must have been some motivation. And so much of school, I have to say, and so much of life is kids showing up because somebody else is telling them what to do and when to do it and how to do it. And, when you're motivated, there's no stopping you. And so it doesn't surprise me that it was quick. That's when she learned, was when she was ready and when there was a reason for her to learn it. And so, one of the other reasons that I'm always pointing out that kids need more independence is they figure out what really interests them, and when they do, that's when they learn. I was talking to a kid this morning. I'm an alumni interviewer for kids who want to go to college. And this young man was really interested in languages. So in high school, he's learning Chinese, which sounds impossible. I can't believe anybody could do that, but he was really smart. And then he said, and then for fun on the side, he's learning Portuguese. And I was like, how? And he said, oh, I just go on YouTube and I started watching TV shows in Portuguese so that I could learn it. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had kids who've taken years and years and years of Spanish lessons at school and can barely say hola because there was no intrinsic motivation. But they've had very big intrinsic motivation to learn how to do other things. And your daughter had that intrinsic motivation at age 20 to go to learn. And why aren't we harnessing the intrinsic curiosity and drive of kids instead of just constantly putting them in activities and telling them what to do?
And why does it stop at kids? Why aren't we doing it with adults and each other? And it leads to the larger conversation about control and manipulation and political influence over our society and the way that we raise our children and the lives that we lead. It's all coming to an end. Lenore, thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you.
The end is nigh. Right. Well, thank you. And have your listeners go to letgrow.org. And if they want to drop me a note, it's lenore@letgrow.org.
You're so wonderful. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon, okay?
Thank you, Mike. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Okay, go to towardanarchy.com, and that's just the easiest way to follow along. It's the best thing you can do. Take those links from there, you just copy it out of the browser, or if you follow on the social media, on the Facebook and the Twitter and all those places, just click that like, that share, that follow, that subscribe button. Because it doesn't work without you. That's what I'm finding out. I mean, that was always the case, but there's only just so much work that can be done. You do A, B, C to get to D. That's just the way it works. And so when you do the A, B, and the C, and you wait and you watch, and you see the D's coming up, it's just over the horizon. It's right there. It's a really great thing, and it's just so easy to do when I have all these wonderful friends and people who are willing to come on and talk about what's going on in the world, because there's so much. I don't even know where to begin from one week to the next. That's why I just have to let it flow. It's why I just have to let it be about me and what I'm doing, and the things that I see, the observances that I make, the understandings and conclusions that I come to about my world as the input comes to it, because there's no way for me to point my attention in the direction that everybody wants me to or needs me to. There's so many different things that we could be talking about, so many different aspects of it. I know people will ask me why I'm not talking about certain things, and there's always a reason. There's always a reason why I'm not talking about a particular event or a particular thing. I don't talk about conspiracy much. I don't use that word. I don't go into a lot of those conversations, those topic lines. But I think if you pay attention, you know that I'm aware of them. I just don't have. I've never been able to place the value in those things in anything other than knowing that they're a real possibility. Not a reality, but a real possibility, and that all things are possible. And I think that goes along with that understanding of the dark side of the individual. I get what what my dark side is, what my limits as an individual are when it comes to other people and their property, and 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 watching the changes in society and culture, and trying to adjust in and find your own place in it is bad enough without compounding it with what you think other people need to get out of it. And so it can be real tough to just decide from any one minute to the next about what's important, what it is that somebody might be thinking about that's going to trigger some positive results in someone. To get, do you understand what I'm getting at here? That with so many different ideas about what's right, what's wrong, what's left, what's right, this constant balance, and I'm only just slightly torn on it myself, but I get that other people are they're really into it. The last few weeks of the election really exposed this, and how much people invest in the ideology and that outward appearance, and all of the energy that's expended on what is ultimately the authoritarian view of how things should be. It's so wasted on it. All that energy, that time, that money, that expense, it's just wasted on trying to alter authority or trying to direct authority. And just imagine if people talk about one of the things you've heard me say this before about how it annoys me when people don't give people their thing, where they won't let them have it. If they want to watch football or play video games or whatever it is that they enjoy, that they have some problem with that, and they talk about it as wasted energy and wasted time. I don't believe that that's true. I believe that there are people that spend way too much time, way too much energy doing some things, and those things are included. But I think people in general waste much more time trying to deal with politics and the outcome of politics and the results of political manipulations than any other thing that they could possibly be doing, which is scary. He's still talking about his youth. He had to share some pictures with me of different things that you could do. That I guess you still get some of this stuff now, but it's all chemical based. There's not as much heat that goes into it, or the heat is so much lower. There was things like easy bake ovens and vacuum form products where you could heat plastic over shapes to design any number of different things that you could do with it, but they still have a lot of that stuff. It's just changed a little bit. It really is not as dangerous as it used to be. That's the bottom line of it. I don't know that one example of something that would be gone that is a manipulation and not just a change in product, not just a natural growth and product of your customers saying, I'm tired of getting burned by this. Can you just not come up with something better? And they do. Lawn darts is a perfect example of that. Gone. They became a weapon. They became a dangerous weapon that injured people, and so they were outlawed. You can't have them. There's very few places. I don't know if you can have them anywhere in America anymore. Do I have a 007 attaché case? I don't. Do you? I have lots of toys, but I do not have a 007 attaché case. Well, the only thing that I don't even know when something like that would be from. I remember there's one toy that I would still want. I remember saving up a whole bunch of money. It was a vintage Star Trek phaser and tricorder and communicator, it all in this little set, and the phaser fired those little plastic discs. This is back before they came out with the little pellets, the little soft balls that in various forms that you can shoot at people now. These were those discs, and they had all kinds of different guns. The little flat discs, you load them into the side of the gun and just squeeze, and it would just fling it across the room. Well, the Star Trek phaser had that. That's the only set and sort of case and thing that I ever remember wanting or having. I did have it for a time, and it's a horrible, terrible tale of childhood woe. Actually, it's one of those things where I watched it in the store forever, and I had to save up my money. I was told that nobody would buy it for me. My grandmother would not buy it for me. My mother wouldn't buy it for me. That I had to save up my own money to get it, and I bought it, and I loved the thing for about 10 seconds before pieces and parts of it started disappearing, getting lost, and it's the typical tragic tale of a child's toy there. See, where else are you going to find that conversation? I like my toys. I have a lot of toys around me. They come in various forms, and I don't think that people should be um, um, lambasted. I don't think that it should be the regular job or point or purpose of any libertarian or voluntarist or anarchist to spend any time talking about how other people spend their time. If you're spending your time talking about how other people are spending their time, then you are wasting your time. That you could better spend your time doing, talking, being something else other than what you're doing. So I've always had a problem with that. Anybody pointing out that they thought that it was a huge waste of time to do things like play video games or watch sports, and I don't believe that's true. I absolutely do not believe that that's true, and I believe that if you took that energy that's spent trying to maneuver through the state and politics and all the manipulations that it's done to our money and our economy and our businesses and every single little thing. I had some guy ask me in the shop the other day. He says to me, "What do you think, that you're oppressed?" I don't feel oppressed. That's what he says to me. He says, I don't feel oppressed. And I said, well, that's because you don't know what freedom is. You've never actually experienced freedom. You actually have grown up in a false paradigm of ridiculous understanding of what your position is in reality. And you've been trained to accept that you are not as important, that your individual existence is not as important as somebody else's, by simple virtue of the fact that they've come along and they've said, well, the system says that I can take this job, I can get this job by whatever means, by fraud, by vote, but I repeat myself, and that I can tell you, and not only tell you what to do with your life, who you can hire, who you can fire, how many hours you can work, what you can get paid, all of these things, but it'll actually tell you that you can or can't live. It'll actually make those decisions for you. You've been raised into this notion that you are second to society, that you are a second class citizen to anybody who's a first class citizen, anybody who considers themselves to be a voter or a patriot, or the people that I call meddlers and these do-gooders and dreamers and people who just don't get reality. That's what it comes down to for me. When I look at these people and I see the things that they're saying and that they're suggesting are the positive ways to approach things, I see ignorance and I see stupidity and I see folly in all of the beliefs that they hold. And it's hard to keep a straight face with somebody. It's hard to not belittle their position. It takes a lot of inner understanding and acceptance that it's okay to let those people be who they have to be, who they think they are, to not just to laugh in their face. It's been a hard lesson to learn, but it's been positive for me, and that's why I bring it up and bring it to you. It's been a positive lesson for me because I'm able to communicate with more people every single day. I'm able to communicate with more and more people. I'm able to get just a little bit closer to finding the individual reasons why a person needs to have themselves validated, why their worldview needs to be brought down in a lot of cases because it's false. It's based on this weird notion that other people can tell you what to do. And the driving thing has had me lately because when it came down to it, I would like it if my own kids, if myself, if everybody would just stop getting driver's license, just stop registering their vehicle, just throw up a tag in the window that says a free man doesn't need permission to travel, and that these people don't own the streets. That's that's the gist of it. That these other people that they're caretakers of it at best, and that they somehow have this magical power to choose who's right and who's wrong, and that they've been given it by virtue of a system that is an obvious failure. So much of this is just I'm just venting at the moment because I've had all these thoughts building up over the last few weeks as we're getting the car and talking about getting tags and just all of these different notions of these little areas where the government says that they get to make the decision, that they get to decide, and that there's this weird existing ritual and practice and idea that some people are more important than other people, and that it's okay to sacrifice self to the collective. And all of these things may be true in individual cases, but they're just not in the bigger picture of things. And so for me, I have this constant battle, and that I have to beat back when it comes to other people and their slavery. I can't free them. I didn't come here to set you free. At best, I have some keys to help you unlock the prison. And I can only do that if I learn to communicate a little bit better that message And so that's what it's all about for me at this point anymore. And it's not even in a deliberate message like it is right here. This is my practice area. You think this is the exercise, that this is the result of all that exercise that I put throughout the week. It's the other way around. This is where I'm getting the practice. I'm getting the practice here, talking to myself and flushing out my ideas and talking to you and talking with these other people, so that I have a better understanding when I'm out there in the real world. It's not the other way around, even though it seems like it. It's really not. That's what's so great about getting to do this, and about how it sharpened my ability to think, and it's really sharpened my ability to speak, and the filler is so much quicker. It almost makes me want to take on some rap battles, even though I've never been a poet and I've never done the trying to make things rhyme thing. I've been watching some rap battles, some wilding out rap battles here recently on YouTube, and I'm like, man, I think I would like to try that. Just another way to get that voice out there and that message, and still be my thing and my fun. We'll be right back to wrap it up on Toward Anarchy. I have to say that is pretty badass. that is really cool. I had never seen one before, but that is the 007 attaché case, and it has it was a Walther P38. It looks like you can build that into a rifle with a scope, and he has some kind of I don't know what that is, a secret notepad or something going on there, and there's some cash and some IDs and a bunch of interesting. That I must say, that is pretty cool. I guess it's not too big based on the size of the little pistol. That's pretty neat. I had never seen one of those before. The bike, I'm not. See, I'm more of an '80s kid. And so my bike, when I look back, my big bike is the GT with the plastic wheel covers. I know it's cheesy as hell, but the GT, the real hardcore bike riding, gleaming the cube or whatever type of bicycle. The GT, that's the ultimate there. But there was that other, it was like a space age, I don't even remember what it was called, but it had some covers over the wheel. That was the first, I mean, as a young kid, I remember liking, before the GT bikes and the sort of that thing really became popular, and all those guys started running and jumping. I was ranting and raving a little bit there, but there's a reason for it, and it's because of this idea that I'm a living, breathing, walking, talking example of the ability to be who you want to be and still be aware of what's going on, still share yourself, still be of yourself, and still make the best of things, even if you haven't always made the perfect choice or the choice that somebody else would have wanted you to make. I've done the things that I've wanted to do in my life, and I've come out on the good side of it. I have a nice, happy family, and I'm not rich, I'm not famous, I'm not a Hollywood actor or rock star or anything like that. But I don't know why it is that people need to aspire to be that. I'm not a politician. I never wanted to be any of those things. At most, the only thing I ever wanted to do was this, and in this case, I would have wanted to play rock and roll records and play and talk about the songs and do more of that necessarily at that point in my life. And I still would. I've talked about wanting to do a different show. I'd love to do a music show again. It's been a long time since I spun records, and I notice myself. I find myself. Name That Tune is back. It's back on TV again, and that's one of those classic television shows that many people grew up with, myself included. And it's back, and I watch those shows, and I think, oh man, I could do this. I could be on one of these, or a Beat Pandora or something like that. But then they played the new music, and I just don't know any of the new music, none of it. Nothing. We got to wrap this up. Hey, I'll be back next week, and we'll do it all over again. It's a big surprise who's coming up next week. Why is it a surprise? because I haven't even told myself yet. I plan to be surprised too. We'll see you there. Take care.